Cyberpunk 2077's collection of bugs and broken mechanics disguised as gameplay is truly impressive. They range from the relatively minor but visually entertaining to the soul-crushing annoyances that have you losing progress and the will to keep playing. However, after a thorough exploration of Night City and beyond, it's worth taking a look at the game that exists buried beneath this disastrous launch. The Cyberpunk 2077 that may come to shine after several rounds of bug-fixing patches and maybe just a few miracles. One of the most impressive things about Cyberpunk is the world that CD Projekt has built. The immersion created by a world so rich in detail and variety makes it easy to get lost in it, both metaphorically and literally. This is one of the few games where the density and seamless nature of the design made me stop and look around saying, "Where the hell am I?" Normally, open-world games have very distinct locations split up across an open world. It's easy to look around and get a sense of where you are and travel accordingly. However, that's not how big cities typically work. There may be landmarks you get to know over time, but there's a reason every street has its name on a sign. When you're roaming through these streets, businesses of all sorts are marked with these unique names and signs. Sure, most of the signs are for strip clubs, bars, and television shows about strip clubs and bars, but the sheer amount is incredible. While you can't walk into every door in the city, you can walk into many surprisingly often. Mostly because there are so many side missions that have you wandering into a location, murdering, stealing, or hacking your way to a fat paycheck. When you make your way back onto the streets, you may run into a ridiculous number of people walking and driving around. I found myself drawn to these numerous NPCs, and not just because many of them were half naked. Each part of the city would have characters representative of their location. The corporate sections would be filled with fancy suits and lavish dresses, while the rougher parts would have people barely put together at all. The number of visible body modifications would show too. Some would even have several limbs shining with chrome as they made their way through the streets. This lady in particular has obviously had a rough time. Even as I made my way outside of the city limits and into the desert sections, there would be impressive moments as skyscrapers were replaced with open skies, dancing clouds, and shining stars. The beauty of sunrises and sunsets were finally apparent as they cast long shadows across the otherwise barren desert landscape. Here there were few cars and even fewer pedestrians, even during the day. This of course meant I could drive like a maniac without plowing into a dozen people at every turn. Driving like a maniac was part of the experience though, at least in general. I often found myself more willing to use fast travel points anytime it was possible because of the complexity of the roads and a minimap that desperately needed to zoom out, making navigating more difficult. Cyberpunk, like The Witcher 3 before it, was built to convey great stories and character development through the main and side quests. Yet with both, the bulk of the gameplay is its tertiary quests that feel like they were written on the back of a napkin in a Shoney's, or whatever the worst restaurant in Poland is. Probably still Shoney's. These are all optional, but you'll be inundated with so many requests to do them as you cruise around town, you'll most likely knock them out just to clear off a map already covered in markers. The exploration of these side gigs might be more entertaining if the mechanics of the gameplay weren't so hit and miss. Like many games that try to appeal to a broad audience with the inclusion of a wide spectrum of gameplay, it ends up being mostly mediocre with nothing standing out. For instance, my intention from the start was to play the game as a stealthy hacker, much in the same way I played the Deus Ex series. In fact, I saw Cyberpunk as a way to get a taste of more Deus Ex in a world where the franchise has been neglected in order to suckle at the teats of Marvel. However, I was sorely disappointed in the experience. Even overlooking the many bugs where I was spotted behind cover and through solid walls, the mechanics of stealth were subpar. Stealth on its own provided few options. The game's RPG-style damage and health mechanics make it a challenge to know when you're going to succeed with silenced weapons or just damage people and enter combat. Plus, the sadistic inclusion of a double-tap dash feature meant there was a pretty good chance I would unintentionally come leaping out of cover looking like a dumbass at any given time. I also had some of the same issues with hacking. Despite the capability for quick hacking to work in combat, it's far more functional outside of combat. Sure, you could quick hack your way to victory, leaving a trail of poison, flaming, brain-fried corpses in your wake. However, that only really works when you've invested many levels and skills and quite a bit of money in a good cyber deck and high-level quick hacks. In the first half of my playthrough, hacking was rarely worth the time it took to pull off. Yet even in a run where I essentially avoided any real investment in the reflexes and body skill trees outside of the bare minimum for their chat options, I found myself relying on run-and-gun mechanics. The thing is, this always seemed to work out fine. On normal difficulty, in most cases I was using whatever gun I found with the highest DPS and blasting enemies with few issues. Worst case scenario, I had to throw some of my near-infinite grenades or take cover while reloading. As the game progressed, I just charged blissfully unresponsive AI behind their cover with a shotgun and finished the mission in record time. Only in missions where you'd get a bonus for remaining undetected was it ever worth the time to stay quiet and meticulously take out enemies. Even when I would opt to quick hack from the shadows and bounce between cameras, it never seemed like it was working properly. Sometimes I would hack a turret to be friendly, but it would just sit there considering its life choices and wonder if being a deadly turret was its best path. If my hacks didn't incapacitate enemies, they would enter some kind of alert state and walk around aimlessly, but never really come find me. Even in times it would claim a netrunner was locating me, it was rare if ever anyone actually walked my way. While some of these issues could be the fault of bugs, it seems like there were some fundamental design issues going on as well. One area in particular where the mechanical design seems to be exceptionally bad is the melee combat. There's a dedicated set of quests that have you street fighting, so you're bound to at least attempt some of this janky nightmare. Here you'll be attempting to connect your punches with feedback that's inconsistent, delayed, and sometimes non-existent. This extends to most melee weapons, meaning you'll be wildly swinging clubs at people as they dance around and you'll only have their health bar as an indicator for whether it's really working. But at least when you bash a guy's head in with a wrench for 3 minutes, you can rest assured that this was a non-lethal encounter. Not every part of the game devolved into combat though. A large part of the main and side missions involve a significant portion of dialogue. Some of this can feel tedious, especially in the earlier parts of the game where there are moments you sit through one dialogue section only to follow it up with another. The seldom used brain dance sections ended up feeling like a glorified point-and-click game rather than the neat detective tool they were set up to be. Then, of course, there are even worse moments where dialogue and travel combine into the devastating walk and talk scenes. Here, you may be forced to follow someone at a painfully slow speed intentionally inhibited by the game. You can run out in front of them if you want, assuming you know where they're going, but then you're playing a guessing game with no reward. It's an annoying trope that should have been phased out in games a long time ago. The developers decided to double down on this with sections where you're just hanging out in the passenger seat of a car waiting through conversations as well. If it wasn't for the quality of the writing and voice acting, I don't think I would have had the patience to continue this. However, it turned out the brightest spot for Cyberpunk 2077 was the storytelling. Unlike previous games that feature famous actors, Keanu Reeves must have spent weeks in the studio recording for his character. He has lines in many of the overall quests in the game. Not just the main quests, but several side quests and even randomly throughout gigs in the open world as well. Not all of them are delivered perfectly, but this is Keanu we're talking about. He's not exactly known for his expert delivery of dialogue.
How about I give you the finger?
What makes this story work so well is that it's never really about anything world-changing. Some significant things go on around you, but the bulk of the narrative is about you as the protagonist trying to survive and succeed. Throughout the main and side missions, various corporations, gang involvement, a collection of fixers, and Johnny Silverhand's disembodied ghost all weave through the narrative, crafting a dizzying story that features dozens of unique characters. The way that V interacts with these characters, as dictated by the player, elicits a variety of responses from each. It felt like I was building relationships with these people based on what I was saying and doing, and it made every dialogue choice have impact. Johnny, Panam, Judy, Carrie, and even the AI proprietor of a cab company, Delamain, grow and develop as the game progresses and your story unfolds. The game even bombards you with a mountain of ebooks you can pick up and read if you want to add hours of reading random crap with little relevance to the rest of the story. V's story isn't a positive one, as is the case with most stories in Night City. It involves struggle and loss from the very beginning. I tried to have a generally positive impact where I could, though it seems like there were just as many people trying to fuck you over as there were genuinely needing help. The brutality of some of these moments in the game can be shocking. When you see the disturbing conclusions some of these characters meet or the situations they live in, it makes the various harsh attitudes you encounter throughout Night City seem a little more justified. In a world where gang wars break out on the street, bodies are hacked up for parts, and sex is a corner store commodity, it makes more sense why there are so many cynical and broken dispositions. Right now, it's difficult to see if Cyberpunk's positive aspects were ever fully overcome the disastrous bug-ridden launch. People are rightly angry at the quality and performance of the game, but some have been lucky enough to make it through without too many game-breaking problems. However, even when the bugs are fixed and more people can enjoy a perspective of the game that doesn't look like it was caked in a thick layer of shit, there are still quirks in the design that will need to be addressed. What is certain, though, is that Cyberpunk 2077 will forever stand as a warning beacon for developers of the future. No matter how ambitious the concept or how much hype it can generate, a good game will always be seen as a hot pile of garbage if it's released too soon and doesn't live up to the advertisement. Thank you for checking out this unabbreviated review. I've always set out to make more of these, but this year I think I'm actually going to try and stick to it. They won't be replacing abbreviated reviews, but variety is the spice of life, and baby, I want to get spicy. And as always, if you like game reviews that aren't really game reviews and sound like commercials, act now and like this video and subscribe to see more.